Chair.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for coming to this evening's public meeting. I think I've met most people here, but for those who haven't, I'm Carl Grenke, Manager of Development Services, and I'm very pleased to open the public meeting at 5:10 to consider two of the projects, the planning projects that our department has been working on over the last little while. So I'll open with our land acknowledgement. On December 15th, 2025, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for this land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful for the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. The town is hosting the public meeting this evening to consider two proposed plans, a proposed Heritage Conservation District Plan under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and amendments to the town's Community Improvement Plan under Section 28 of the Planning Act. We'll first discuss the proposed Heritage Conservation District Plan, or HCD. In the planning world, we often rely on acronyms there. So the public is reminded that this meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on the proposed HCD plan, and the town welcomes any comments that you may have. We also encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Heritage Act indicates that in accordance with subsection 41.8, a person who does not raise objections to the adoption of a proposed heritage conservation district by making oral representations or written submissions may be denied an opportunity to appeal the passing of a bylaw adopting the plan under the Act. So I will now pass the meeting over to Christian Giansante of Stantec Consultants, the authors of the HCD, and they will give an overview of the proposed plan, and following their presentation, we'll open the floor to comments from the public. So I'll turn it over to you, Christian.
Thank you. Maria, are you able to click through?
I am.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. I believe I've met most of you. My name is Christian. I've been working with the town on the HCD plan. So we'll just do a quick overview of the HCD plan, what steps we've gone through, where we are at now, and then I'm here for any questions or open to any feedback that you might have. Next slide, please. Like I just said, two easy things. What is an HCD plan, and then the Smiths Falls HCD specifically. So Carl did a very good overview of HCDs in general as he opened the meeting. I will just flag that the HCD, rather than individual property designation, it looks at designation of an area as a whole. So you're looking at the character of an entire area rather than the character of a specific building. So it really is the macro rather than the micro in terms of character and in terms of kind of how we manage it moving forward. I'll also bring your attention to the number at the bottom. There are currently 149 HCDs in Ontario, even just up from last year. I believe our number was 144, so that's 5 new ones in the span of a year. Maybe you could be number 150, which is a fun number. And just the other point above is that the HCD is a tool for managing change. It's not a retroactive tool. It's not designed to change anything that currently exists, but just to make sure that moving forward, alterations are sympathetic with the character of the area, that alterations are well made to preserve the character of the area, and that new construction is also compatible with the overall character of the area as well. Next slide, please. And just a reminder, this is some of you may have seen this slide before, but HCDs are really just to protect the area, to promote cultural tourism. Oh, and there's Megan, hello. And to manage change within the area. It's, again, not, actually, before I get into the don'ts, which is on the next slide, please. HCDs really aren't meant to prohibit new construction. They're not meant to prohibit development. They're not intended to lower property values. They're not intended to strip your property owners of their rights or require construction to match specific types. Yes, there are permits and that may be required for alterations, but the HCD plan lays out specifics on how to deal with those. And for minor alterations to buildings, there is a list of exemptions that have been identified that don't require a permit at all. Next slide, please. So the HCD process is typically divided into two phases. The first phase is the HCD study. The HCD study looks at the history of the area, it looks at the heritage character of the area, and we do an evaluation of the area to determine if it warrants consideration as an HCD. So that HCD study was completed in 2024. I think it was this time last year, 1 week ago, that we presented that to council here. And then from that HCD study, we've dived into the HCD plan phase, which is a more policy-focused document, looking at what types of policies the town and the community wants to guide change within the HCD. So that's where we are today, looking at the final draft HCD plan, pardon me. Next slide. Like I was saying, in the HCD plan, we are looking at a means of confirming HCD objectives. What do we want this HCD to do here in Smiths Falls? Developing policies and guidelines. These can range from policies for new construction, all the way to replacing roofs or repairing roofs, all the way to minor repairs and maintenance. It really does run the gamut of everything. And we've also identified how to implement it here in Smiths Falls. There's already a robust CIP program, so working into tying it into there and tying it into just the way that things work here in town, so that there's not too much red tape when it comes to permits. In terms of public consultation, we've had public information centers throughout the process. We've had two public information centers in 2024 as part of the study phase, and 2 this year as part of the plan phase. The first was in March at the beginning of the process, and the second was in September towards the end, and that's where the draft HCD plan has been available for public review. And then the last bit, hold statutory public meeting. That's what we're here doing today. Next slide, please. The other thing that we're looking at when developing the HCD plan is kind of finding that balance between a flexible plan and a prescriptive plan. This was a PowerPoint, so the slider bar moved, but now it's just a PDF, so it doesn't move anymore. But it's figuring out how to strike a balance between a very prescriptive plan that is very conservation focused, that is very clear, and it's specific as to how things done, or a more flexible plan where there's a lot of open-endedness and it gives a little more flexibility to property owners, to users of buildings within the area, namely tenants, and trying to strike a balance between the two that isn't too onerous on anyone, but also still preserves the character of the area. Next slide, please. So just an overview of what we've identified as the HCD boundary here in Smiths Falls. It is centered along Beckwith, extending from Elmsley all the way down to the Rideau Canal. Properties identified in green have been recommended as contributing properties, which means that they contribute directly to the heritage character of the area. And properties identified in yellow are non-contributing buildings, which means they're not directly linked to the heritage character of the HCD, but they still fall within the boundary. So the policies and guidelines for contributing versus non-contributing buildings are slightly different one from the other. Next slide. And then just again, recapping the type of consultations that we've done. 2 PICs, there's been a steering committee that has kind of guided the process. We've worked with realtors, we've worked with city staff, we've worked with the public, meetings with the MHC, gathering their feedback, and also meetings with council, just to really kind of get as much feedback as we can. And again, tonight, opening the floor to anyone else who might have some thoughts on the HCD. Next slide, please. And that's it for now, until we speak again later. So I will pass it back to Carl. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. We'll now hear from members of the public who wish to address the proposed Heritage Conservation District Plan. So please be advised that verbal comments do form part of the public record, and as such, we ask that you please state your name, your address, or your organization if you're speaking on behalf of one. So if anyone has any comments or questions, by all means, please feel free to speak up, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Bob Swan, I'm on the board of directors. I am the chairman of the board of trustees at Trinity United Church. And of course, we have responded 3 times with submissions about the process and where Trinity fits within it. I didn't bring my notes because I wasn't sure how this was going to unfold, but I did leave a submission for the council this morning. I think, let me just say, there are pieces of it which I'm very grateful are in there, and that's with respect to the places of worship that are now part of the Ontario Heritage Act. In the toolkit with respect to, and it describes how one might view and consider how churches function and the challenges that they may face with respect to being part of the program. So they're unique perhaps to some other, to just businesses in general. So that is a bit of a concern of how we fit in, because finances are a big part of where we sit. And so I guess there's more what ifs and concerns about the financial implications of being part of the project and being included in the project within the boundary. So that has been made. And I think the other one is that the United Church of Canada has its own rules and regulations with respect to administration of property. So anything that we do in connection with our space within the district requires higher approval than what we can give. And I think I made that clear in the notes, that that just creates an extra level of administration, an extra level of administrative burden, and causes, I guess, a lot of concern for the congregation itself, who in fact are the ones who subsidize and make sure that we are functioning as the church changes over time. So I'm trying to think of the three things that I put down there. But anyway, I left that reflection in the submission, and I sent it to Mr. Costello this morning. So that'll be referred to and left to the council to consider as we move forward.
Yeah, and I can confirm that your submission was shared with council this morning as well.
Okay, that's great. But other than that, there's a lot of good things in there now, and I'm very grateful that there's a space identified for a place of worship and uniqueness of it within the Act, the Ontario Heritage Act, and obviously within the plan for the town of Smiths Falls.
Thank you so much. Any other comments?
Well, yes.
Please go ahead.
I'm a bit of a history buff. I've been in Smiths Falls for 55 years or thereabouts, and I just made some submissions to, my name's Laurie Saywell, by the way, and I've seen what's been going on down around the basin and so forth, but the Stone Arch Dam really concerns me. It's there, but there are people here who don't know it's there. And in fact, the town, over the years, have done everything they can to realize where the Stone Arch is and what it represents in the town. Without the Stone Arch Dam, Smiths Falls would not exist. Plain and simple. What they've done over the years is backfilled the runoff and made a car park at the expense of the Stone Arch Dam itself. The Stone Arch Dam should be there for the world to see, and the car park that's in front, that's of it, should be removed, and from the Stone Arch Dam down to the river by the back of the old Sofa Theatre should be made into a park. Right now, it's just sitting there. Okay, we've just had a fire, which has changed that whole aspect completely. But I think now that the focus is back where I think it should be, something should be done about bringing that Stone Arch Dam back up to representing Smiths Falls and that's just my opinion. I really believe that it's been buried over the years, and it's 200 years old for crying out loud, or at least it will be in 5 years. And I think we should be doing everything we can to bring that front row centre. And I have made some submissions.
Yeah, we caught it. So thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments on the Heritage Conservation District plan? All right, well. Oh,
Sorry, I was watching on the internet, but your transmission dropped. So I sort of got a sense of the map of what it covers. So it's basically one block either side of Beckwith. Now, does it encompass down around the area this gentleman's talking about, the waterworks?
It does. It does take in the lands, the town-owned lands around the old waterworks and Confederation Park. Could you? Oh, sorry. Could you state your name, please?
Brad Millen.
Brad Miller. Okay. Sorry, we just have to record for the minutes. Could we back up? Could you back up the PowerPoint, please, to the map?
Okay.
So that takes in the lands around the town-owned lands around Old Mill.
Could you answer why some of the buildings are designated heritage and some are not? Like in the same district?
Yeah, I need to stand up, I'll stand up. I'll stand up. Yeah, so basically the way that we looked at it was when you're doing the evaluation of the district as a whole, we have to follow Ontario Regulation 906, which is the criteria for determining heritage values. There are 9 criteria, and in an HCD, you need 25% of the buildings to meet 2 or more criteria. So that's anything that's green met 2 or more criteria. Anything that's yellow, we identified as being only 1 criteria. So, for example, if we think of the Shoppers Drug Mart, for example, the Shoppers Drug Mart is not really a very architecturally significant building, but it is contextually linked to the entire Main Street corridor of commercial buildings. So it met 1 criteria through its context, but it didn't meet any significant historical associations or any significant design associations, which is why it would be marked as a non-contributing building. Whereas something like, if we think of the Hotel Rideau, the Hotel Rideau has strong historical associations with the community. It has very significant architectural design, and it's contextually linked to that corridor, so it met more than 2 criteria. So it became a contributing building. So that's kind of the threshold for contributing versus non-contributing, but non-contributing buildings are still designated under Part 5 if they're within the district, because, like I was saying earlier, you're looking at the area as a whole. So even though one building may not be specifically heritage, its contribution to the area as a whole adds to the area's character. So,
Mr. Millen, did we answer your question, or did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, and I can sort of see, I recognize the Rexall that you're talking
Yeah.
about in the. Now, I caught a little bit of the transmission on the internet. Now, you talked about within the zone, you might specify certain things like roofs.
Mhm.
Like, can you elaborate more? Like, I guess one example would be on Main Street, the old Remax place. It's got a copper standing seam roof. So I don't own that building. I'm just curious in that situation if they needed to replace the roof, would they be stuck with having to do the same one?
So generally, we recommend like-for-like replacement. That is kind of the most straightforward means of kind of making alterations within the HCD. There are additional guidelines that might nudge people in like a preferred direction in terms of materiality, in terms of design. But it's more on a case-by-case basis on what is a required policy versus what is a recommendation. Ultimately, we're not looking to freeze a place in time. We're looking to conserve the heritage value of the area and allow it to grow and change. while preserving the key historic aspects of the HCD.
So the word you would nudge people in a certain direction. What does nudge mean?
So, yeah.
Would you give them a tax break if they replace it with a copper seal, or what is a nudge?
So there are in the document, in the HCD plan, there's for specific, for example, with roofs, there are specific policies which are kind of must-dos for when you're working on roofs. And then there's guidelines which are strongly encouraged approaches for, making those changes within the HCD. So policy, mandatory, guideline, strong recommendation. In terms of incentives, I believe Jonathan's grabbing a copy of the HCD plan. But in terms of incentives, being part of the HCD ties you into the CIP program, which is already established here in Smiths Falls, and I believe we'll be talking about it later. Not to quote Marie, but I think she was saying for changes to heritage buildings, there's an 85% 85% coverage for some projects.
That's right, and I think that's
Also, there may be some financial incentives, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So that recognizes that often if you are replacing with a synthetic heritage supported material, then that's often more expensive than sort of the cheapest common denominator. So the community improvement plan is a tool that we offer to help offset some of those costs.
So FUD filters into the CIP. You're familiar with that program?
You're not paying me yet? $20.
All right.
Yes, I did.
No, it makes sense. So,
Yeah,
so there's incentivization.
it works really
Yes.
nicely hand in hand with the policy for instance that Smiths already has established, which is not seen everywhere else. It's really nice to see here.
Well, thank you.
Where are they? Kilmarnock.
Any final comments on the Heritage Conservation District before we move on?
I came in about, that dam he was talking about on the edge of the parking lot.
Nice.
I'll be happy about that too. 'Cause it peeks out and it looks like it must be a marble structure. And from my understanding, it used to be quite a tall dam when it used to supply the generation station. Because I think Smiths Falls was one of the early towns to have power in the core. And I think that was part of the feed to the original hydro dam thing. But what does peek out, it looks like it could be amazing. I don't know, that could be our new falls. Just throwing it out there.
Appreciate that. All right. So I guess we'll tee up the second part. So thank you for that. Town Council is the approval authority for the proposed Heritage Conservation District Plan, and the comments provided at this meeting or beforehand will be provided to Council for their consideration. So I'll just jump into the next item, which is the presentation of the draft bylaw to amend the Community Improvement Plan. So a CIP is a tool available to the town to provide support and incentives to development that addresses a local priority. So the current community improvement plan we have was adopted by Council in October 2022 and offers 15 funding programs in 4 broad subject areas: attainable housing, which applies town-wide, brownfield redevelopment, accessibility, both of which apply town-wide, and also downtown revitalization, looking at internal and facade improvements, and that only applies to the downtown area. These 4 strategic focus areas were identified by Council, and each year Council decides which of the 15 programs to activate, and each year Council decides which applications to support. After having worked with the new CIP for a few years, Council has decided to undertake a review of the programs and policies, and you'll see that there's some harmony in what we're looking at through the CIP along with the Heritage Conservation District. So to help in that review, town staff consulted with a variety of stakeholders, including town committees and others such as the Downtown Business Association. So we'll just jump right into what we're proposing here. So the focus of the amendments is on the accessibility, affordable housing, heritage conservation. We have some more heritage supportive policies that we're proposing, responding to increased costs and some operational requirements. We're not proposing changes to the brownfield redevelopment policies. We haven't identified the need for that. Next slide, please. So the accessibility improvements, we're proposing to allow to fund. Currently, we only fund accessibility improvements to access the main front-facing door of a business, and I think that's important. That's to ensure that the accessible entrance is the same as the entrance that everybody else uses. However, there are a variety of circumstances in which that's simply not feasible. If there's an issue with encroachment, if there's a relationship with potentially a heritage item to work through. So we're proposing, if it's not feasible to upgrade the main entrance, then we can support the upgrading of a separate entrance. We're also proposing to expand the eligible projects to include exterior lifts, as well as increase the funding threshold from $15,000 to $25,000. That reflects simply that costs have gone up since the CIP was originally contemplated. Next slide, please. We're proposing a number of changes to the affordable housing programs that we have, and those apply to developments where there's a minimum of 6 new affordable units. We're proposing to increase the tax rebate from 50% to 80% of the assessment increase. So that is if there's a base assessment, and then if the development happens, then there's a new assessment, a higher assessment, and then up to, if it's a nonprofit, if it's a market development, it would be 50% of the overall increase would be rebated for as a proportion where the units are affordable. So we'd also offer an additional 20% tax rebate if the affordable units are also accessible beyond the requirements of the Ontario Building Code. So the development charge rebate, we currently, our CIP currently offers a rebate of development charges for if somebody's proposing a new affordable unit development. That has been repealed. We're proposing to repeal that because the province has actually changed the Development Charges Act, so that is to automatically enter that into it. So we didn't want to create an overlap. So we're also proposing to define affordable based on provincial planning statement definitions, which relies on a Lanark County, including Smith Falls, a bulletin that is issued generally on an annual basis. So that replaces a calculator, a fairly convoluted calculator that we have right now and used to define attainable housing. Next slide, please. We're proposing a suite of changes to our downtown and heritage properties programs. So we're including, the biggest change is we're proposing to add a new program for residential heritage properties. So if you have a designated residential property, you wouldn't be currently eligible under the community improvement plan. That only applies to non-residential buildings within the downtown core area. However, we recognize that in order to really and best upkeep residential heritage properties, those can involve higher costs in terms of materials and design. So we're offering some assistance there if the property is a designated property. And you'll see there as well that there's a number of changes that are proposing to sort of increase the amount and the threshold for facade improvements and interior properties if they are designated heritage, either as individual designations or if it's a contributing property within the Heritage Conservation District. So that's where the Heritage Conservation District and the CIP we're intending to align the objectives here and provide some meaningful support for that. Next slide, please. So I'll quickly breeze through the operational requirements. We are proposing a number of administrative changes to sort of help facilitate the processing of applications, getting some design expertise on the evaluation projects, making some changes to how we handle quotes and design elements, and then also some changes to a few of the definitions to reflect legislative changes. Also, currently the current CIP establishes priorities for funding. So I think, as you'll see here, all of these changes generally open up the funding envelope to accommodate potentially more funding for projects. However, how much money we have available each year depends on what's available and what's approved set aside by council in the budget. So if we're not increasing funding, for example, then we have to be very particular, I guess, in terms of what it is that we would be what we would be funding. So I think we're proposing to insert a new provision stating that if we have more applications, more eligible applications than we have money available, then we would prioritize the funding that has the highest overall impact for the municipality. So that's defined very broadly, of course, but it allows us really to find what has the best bang for the buck and encourage the broadest public interests. So the reason why we're doing these changes, it's for a number of reasons. We're looking to reflect increased construction costs, more meaningfully support high value, high impact developments, as well as certainly support heritage sympathetic improvements, create a little bit more flexibility for accessibility improvements, streamline operations, and review to clarify the focus of the CIP and align with provincial legislation. We're also, not as part of this, as sort of another parallel project, we're updating the downtown core design guidelines that gives us some broader sort of direction as to what we want to see for development in the downtown. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy to hear any feedback from members of the public who wish to address the proposed CIP amendments. And as with the HCD, please be advised that verbal comments do form part of the public record. And as such, we ask you to state your name and address or your organization if you're speaking on behalf of one. So if you have any comments on the proposed CIP, we welcome that. All right. Thank you for that. So we'll just wrap up here. So we thank you for attending and participating in the planning process for the Heritage Conservation District Plan and the Community Improvement Plan amendments. Anyone who would like to be notified of the decision on either of these topics is asked to either leave their full name or mailing address or email address on the sign-in sheet that's located right there, or by contacting myself. I left my card in the front there via email or phone. And we certainly, and on behalf of council, we certainly appreciate your attendance and the feedback that you have to offer, and we'll take that into consideration as we move to the next steps. So this will conclude the public meeting. I appreciate your participation, and we'll move into the council meeting.
Good evening and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting on December 15th, 2025. We acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. So we'll call the meeting to order at 5:54 p.m. and I'll look for an approval of the agenda. Councillor Miller has an amendment.
I do, please. I would propose that we defer 9.3 and 9.4, just so we have time to absorb the feedback from tonight's public meeting.
Okay, so I'd like to ask maybe Manager Grenke, because I think this might be our last opportunity to put forward suggestions for edits to the plan. Or we have the opportunity tonight to suggest edits to the plan based on public feedback and MHC meetings. So in that context, if people are ready to have a conversation on that tonight, we could do it. If not, we could postpone that until January. But I know we've got Christian here tonight that may have a presentation that he wants to give. So I definitely don't think we should approve the plan tonight because obviously we just had public feedback and the MHC was looking to see a copy of the final draft before it comes. But there still would be an opportunity to have a discussion at the Horseshoe if we want to. And I'm not sure what the presentation was going to get into. Manager Grenke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The presentation that our consultants at Stantec have prepared is going to be focusing largely on what we've heard from the public. We've received some feedback from MHC, from Trinity United within the last week or so, and some comments have been provided today. So whether that's this evening or at a future meeting, will be the presentation discussion will largely be addressing the feedback that we've had, giving council some opportunity to sort of decide on any changes you may want to have, and then just focusing on the next steps.
Councillor McKenna?
Well, just a point of order. There's an amendment on the floor, but there hasn't been seconded yet. So we really shouldn't be getting into a debate on that until it's
seconded by Councillor Robinson. So continue.
I'm fine with going ahead just to hear the information, as knowing that we're not going to make a decision tonight and it'll come forward in January. But it's up to the will of council.
Mayor Panko?
I guess the same way, unless for some reason we get really extended here, and then maybe make some changes. This will be being too late because we also have a couple of pretty lengthy in-camera items, I believe. But
so I'm seeing consensus to defer the CIP discussion, but we'll see the presentation. Would that be okay?
Well, I mean, there's a motion, so you can vote on it. I'm voting to defer them both.
Defer them both. Okay.
But I'm just one vote, so.
Okay, so let's vote on that. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Miller.
Okay, so all in favor?
Of my
Your
motion?
1, 2, 3,
okay.
4?
Yep.
Okay,
Defer
so
all.
those will both be deferred. Okay, so that will take 9.3 and 9.4 off the agenda. That will bring us to, so that was a motion to amend the agenda, but we still need to approve the agenda as amended now. So we'll take a motion to approve the amended agenda, moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All in favor? That is carried. The next is any disclosure of pecuniary or conflict of interest. Seeing none, we don't have any approval of the minutes. Do we have any directors' reports tonight, Sierra Morris?
Not this evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. So that brings us into 9.1, utility rate analysis with Director Dauber.
Is Andrew here? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Council. Tonight we're going to have Andrew Mirabella from the Henson Group. He's going to be providing some information on rate analysis to come back and answer the question that had been brought by council about what does it look like for us to be fully funded in water. I believe at the time an example was given to rip off the Band-Aid all at once and then maybe look at 5 years and a 10-year analysis of what that might look like. Mr. Mirabella will be presenting here shortly in a minute, but there's actually 2 items on the agenda and they're both separate. One is for this analysis, but the other is to pass a motion, and I hope I'm saying that right, to approve the water financial plan, which is that's a legislated housekeeping item. That's a requirement to renew the water license in order to continue providing water to the residents of Smith Falls. That will be coming up shortly, and I'd just like to introduce Andrew from the Hempson Group. Are you there, Andrew?
I am. Great. Thanks for the introduction, Paul. Presumably everyone can hear me. So again, my name is Andrew Mirabella from Hempson Consulting. So maybe just to provide a kind of a tad more context, so we were asked to prepare a subsequent kind of utility rate analysis for the municipality related to looking at the evaluation of the existing funding model for utility rate services. So I see someone's sharing the screen for me. So if we want to go to the next slide, we can go to kind of the first thing is going to be the scope of work. And maybe just it's coming up really blurry on my end, and I'm not sure if council is seeing the same thing, but if I can share, if you want, we can switch to my sharing screen. I don't know if that'll help, but I can certainly read it because I prepared it, but I just wanted to make sure council can read what's on the slide.
It's good here, Andrew.
It is? Okay. All right. So there's kind of 3 elements to our scope of work. There's the evaluation of our existing water and wastewater system funding model. We'll look at a sensitivity test here in terms of eliminating the tax support for rate funded services. And then we'll get into some next steps. And really today is just the kind of the quantitative analysis and the sensitivity test to kind of understand the differences between the existing model and if we were to move to an alternative structure, which alleviates the tax support from the rate system. Go to the next slide. So just to kind of look at maybe the summary of our current state and what we're looking at, the net operating costs of our existing water system is about $3.66 million. And you'll see that there's about $523,000 worth of tax funding support to offset our rate requirements. And you'll see the net rate, water rate requirement is about $3.1 million. Similarly, on the wastewater side, the net operating costs, which need to be funded from the rates, would be about $3.5 million. But there is a tax funded support of about $430,000, which gives us our net wastewater rate requirement of about $3.06 million. So there's about just $955,000 in tax funding used to support the water and wastewater systems. There's about $6.2 million in rate revenues that are generated to fund the utility rate funded system expenses. And that's largely funded between your fixed charges, which are by meter size, and then your variable rate, which is our consumption-based component. So, from a context perspective, you are receiving obviously the tax support to help support the funding model here for your utility rate system. Most Ontario municipalities generally are reliant on the fixed charges and the variable charges, so any funding from the utility rates to fund the entirety of the system. That said, there are exceptions, and there are systems like yourselves that are also in the province which do still have a tax support, whether it's for water or wastewater services. Those do exist. So not an anomaly, but certainly the majority is a self-funded system. So we go to the next slide, just to look at the kind of the breakdown of the services and how much a household pays for in 2025 for both property tax and utility rates. And we're showing both because it's important when we do the sensitivity test to understand that there is a relationship between Yes, there's going to be changes on utility rates, but there's also going to be changes on the property tax under the assumption that all remains equal, and we are going to be making the change on both the tax side and on the utility rate side. So on the property tax side, we kind of picked what we'll call the average household with a current value assessment of $180,000, with that household consuming on average 200 cubic meters a year. And you see in 2025, based on the existing structure, that typical household would pay about $4,920 for services, mostly related to about $3,400 in property taxes, and the water and the wastewater bill for that usage pattern on a residential fixed charge connection charge would be about $1,523. Again, combined, that's the $4,922 that we see there for the typical payable bill. So why that's important is we wanted to kind of set the basis for the sensitivity test. Well, what that means if we look at that over the longer term under that typical, what we'll call typical household over the planning period. So if we go to the next slide, over the longer term, based on the average C of A that we've got and the average consumption user, if we were to move to a 100% utility rate based funding model, those average users are going to be paying marginally more for services than they are under the current state. And what we see on the graph here is our base case scenarios, our current state, that's in green. And then we've tested 3 different alternative structures where we have the phase out immediately in 2026 being the red bar, phase out over 5 years is the blue bar, and then the phase out over a 10-year period being the gold bar. And those average users with those different parameters, based on whether the phase out's immediate or spread over a slightly longer term, those users will pay about 1% to 2% more for services than they are in the current state. Now that's pretty close to the almost a neutral bill, but I guess just a couple things to be cognizant of here. One, the analysis is obviously illustrated in $2025 over the period. And it does, especially for the longer term scenarios, that does assume that the transition is occurring and we're giving the benefit of those reductions to the property tax bill, so base. So we have to make sure that as we're rolling it out, as we're seeing the savings on the tax side, because we're not supporting the utility rate base anymore, that money is not being distributed to other municipal services to offset inflation pressures or anything else. It is a matter of trying to keep that within that bucket. So we're transitioning those savings over the longer term. One thing that we don't know, and because there's 2 variables at play here, which is really important to understand. There's the assessment value variable, and then there's the consumption variable, which plays into what one would pay. And at present time, not to suggest we can't do it, but just on the kind of the week and or so turnaround from this request, we don't know how many each of these users are combined in that bucket. So we'll have to understand who's actually going to see the benefit, and maybe there's going to be winners. We're going to pay more or less from that baseline consumption. So I think we're going to have to do a little bit of a deeper dive here to understand who is in those 2 buckets between the value side and then the consumption side over the longer term. But that's kind of set the stage. We've now tested 4 different options or 4 different scenarios to understand that variance between different assessment patterns and different consumption patterns for a typical user. So we go to the next slide. Just to kind of look at that a little bit more. So sensitivity test number 1.
Andrew?
Yes?
We have a question here before you continue, please.
No, I just want, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to know if you want questions as you go or wait till the end. It was just something on that last point, but you might cover it off later. I didn't want to interrupt you, but should we wait?
It's completely up to the clerk and the chair. I'm happy to take questions now or at the end.
Yeah, if there's a slide up now, there's a question on it.
Well, I guess it might you might get into it when you start giving the different examples, but I was looking for a scenario that could illustrate your last point about you're not sure based on people's consumption and on their assessment rate, those are unpredictable. But
Right.
I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on that, or give me I think I understand it, but this is tricky stuff, so I wanted to get it right.
No, that's fair. And I get into it a little bit more on the coming slides where we give different examples of different assessments, so higher assessed value homes with lower consumption and vice versa, just to give that range. But it still won't give us the approximate number of users in each bucket yet. But we have done some tests around based on some of the data where those customers might lie in terms of the impact on that household. Is that fair?
Sure, thank you.
No problem. So just on sensitivity test 1, and just to kind of look at what's here, we do have this as kind of the average CVA and average consumption. So following up on the last on the previous slide, this represents kind of the change in an immediate phase out scenario, and you see the total on the top represents the charge in 2025, and then the charge in 2026 in the gold bar. And we see that there's a net impact of about $193 on that typical user in total. But how that works out is it's because we're going to see a reduction in our notional household tax bill of about $104, while the water rates will go up by about $297. So while we do see a reduction on the average user for the tax side, it's more than offset, with an increase on the utility rate side. So we don't completely offset that property tax rate reduction. And on an immediate phase out scenario, we're looking at about a 2% increase from the base case scenario over the longer term. So that's to put some context on how this works. Again, there's that 2 variables, and it's going to impact on your consumption pattern and where your assessed value is at in terms of what each customer is going to see on their end rate. Now, just to kind of get into some of those maybe different scenarios that the counselor was talking about. So we go to the next slide, we can get into scenario test number 2. So maybe we can look at, well, what's a mid kind of CVA and an average consumption. So we saw that the average CVA based on the municipality's data set was 180,000, but if we were to bring that up to about $275,000 from an assessed value, keeping the consumption at 200 cubic meters, what effectively happens here, this is kind of what we'll call is almost like the break-even user in terms of the transition from your 2025 to your 2026 bill, where the taxes bill goes down $160, your utility rates will go up, but we still see a net increase of about $137. But this would be in line with what you would see in which you would continue to have a tax support in your funding model. So the rates would be going up in a base case scenario anyways, and this would represent virtually no change from the existing model to the kind of this alternative structure, which we're alleviating the tax support into your utility rates. If we go to sensitivity test number 3, what happens if there is a low CVA and a high consumption household? So a 100,000 assessed value home with consumption of about 350 cubic meters a year. We see that the total bill, the net impact's about just over close to $310 in a year. So we have a very low reduction in the taxes because the assessed value is lower on the lower end. However, because the volume is much higher, the rate impact that we're seeing is going to impact those higher volume households a lot more. So we'll see that $366 increase on the utility rates, which obviously is more than any of the reduction that we're going to see on the property tax side. So we see a higher increase on the total bill there of about $310. And I'll summarize the options in a couple slides here just to kind of show the impact cumulatively. I just want to go through one more sensitivity test, which is sensitivity test number 4, which is looking at a higher assessed value home and assuming that they have a low consumption pattern in that household. So what happens here is because of the high assessed value and kind of the movement away or the savings from not supporting the utility rate system anymore, there would be a more significant reduction on the tax bill, which because they've got a low volume household, the impact on the utility rates isn't going to be as great. So the actual net impact is a reduction from 2025 to 2026 for that particular household or that particular user. And again, one of the caveats to this is we don't know how many users in the municipality at this point are in each of these different buckets or the variance in between them. And that's one thing that you'll see as part of my recommendations and next step slide is to really make sure that we understand the user groups that are going to be impacted by any particular change. If we go to the next slide, just to kind of look at the comparison of options, and this looks at the cumulative 11-year payable amounts. And this looks at the 4 options that we have, the one on the far left being your mid-range option, which is the C of A plus the average consumption. So the C of A about 275,000 per household, plus the average consumption of 200 cubic meters. We see that under all the different options, the base case, the phase out over the 10-year period, phase out over the 5-year period, and then the phase out immediately in 2026, it's pretty much neutral under all options. So whether the base case, as we're moving forward with the utility rates over the planning period, which is based on our rate study, and whether we phase out the analysis immediately or phase it out over longer term, that bill or that user is going to be paying virtually the same under they are under the base case. So really no change to them. If you move to a low assessed value house, lower assessed value house with a higher consumption pattern, we see that now that we get into a little bit more of a change or a variance. And under all those different options, depending on which one you go with, and obviously the impact being if you phase it out immediately, the impact is highest, but it's about a 3 to 5% impact on the total payable bill. That means if relative to what the municipality would be currently doing under the existing rate model and the projections, if we were to deviate and keep with those same rate increases, because the costs are still the same, but just have a change in our funding structure, we would obviously, those users to see 3 to 5% more of an impact on their utility bill. We look at the average C of A and the average consumption, there's about a 1 to 2% variance from the bill. So again, those are our kind of average customer across the board based on the data. And they would pay marginally more, about 1 to 2% for services relative to the base case under a phase out of our tax support on the user rate model. And then the last one is the user group that's a higher C of A that we just showed, and a lower consumption pattern household. And in this instance, they would actually see a savings on their total bill payable, as they would see the greatest impact on the reduction on the taxes, which is not offset by the higher utility rates that they would see, because they still only consume a small portion of water relative to the average. So there's clearly a variance in terms of the typical households and the bills that one would see based on this kind of phase out or alternative structure on the utility rates. So maybe just to cap off, and I'm happy to take some questions. I know this is pretty technical, but if we go to the next slide, I think, just based on our analysis thus far, it is clear that obviously I think the biggest thing is that there's 2 real variables at play here, the assessed value component and the consumption patterns of each household. So the municipality, I believe, should be looking at compiling the list of everybody who's connected to the services, look at the valued assessment of each of them and their associated consumption, and try to understand what that shift will look like at the end user impact. So what it would look like under their 2025 bill and 2026 bill based on their properties, and we can start to understand and evaluate that impact by user group and customer group. So we do know how many people are in each of those different buckets who are going to see the change. At that point, it might be prudent to obviously review that technical analysis with council and potentially the public, depending on the outcomes of that analysis. And then with that, it'd be good to at least then develop an implementation plan and strategy to, if council chooses to phase out that tax support on the user rate and have the rate model fully self-sustaining, how that's going to look like, whether it's immediate, 5-year, or 10-year, based on an understanding of those user groups. So that was the kind of the synopsis of the analysis there. I know I took one question, but I'm happy to take some others if council or committee has any.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a little surprising to me that it had the kind of outputs that I'm seeing here. I thought it might be relatively equal. Did you account for it? You talk about consumption, but does that include the service charges, like for delivering and all of that in there? That, like, there's some base costs and then there's a consumption. Do you use that term generically, or?
Yeah, so through the chair, the total charge would be both the fixed charge and the variable rates. So it would be the total cost that one would pay for water and wastewater services in that year.
And there's that much variation in our consumers of how much of our wonderful water they're consuming. I thought it would be relatively level.
So we through the chair, we didn't get into the specifics on the utility rate side of the differences in the customer base, but we would assume that there's going to be someone who are above and below the average consumption. Now, how many are in each of those different groups? That we'd have to look at. But just even from our experience in other municipalities, you'll always see some that are on the low end of, one person in a household or low PPUs, to higher volume households with 3, 4, 5 people living in it who would have higher consumption patterns above the average. So that would be typical. And then the next question is how much of the non-res and how are those users going to be impacted? But we just focused it, at least for today's sensitivity test, on the residential side.
And if I could have one more, it appears that people that are being assessed in the most expensive homes get the biggest break. So whatever we decide to do, there has to be a fairness principle or something applied, I think. But thank you. This is a really good start. I thought it would be more straightforward, but alas, municipal world is never straightforward. Thank you.
Marpenko.
Thank you. I think a great analysis to get the conversation started. There's obviously more information. I too was a bit surprised that we weren't closer to being, I guess, break even. Not that the difference is that much, but I thought if we're taking 955 grand off of the tax rolls, that would equate to over a bit more than 4% increase, a 4% reduction. Yet what I see overall here, average maybe is about 3%, is in around that mark. So there's a difference. I assume maybe that difference is somewhat is obviously the impact on commercial, industrial, institutional, as well as there are some taxpayers who are not water users. I guess that would move the numbers one way or the other. So, you did not do an analysis on commercial or industrial. So I think that's something that I think. Yeah, so I think that would give us further insight. And I think on that side, obviously they're writing off both their taxes and their water bills. So the net impact is different for an industrial commercial user than it would be on a residential taxpayer. But overall, do you know approximately how much of our tax revenue is coming from non-residential sources? And does the residential number include multi-residential?
So probably for your first question, I'd have to defer to finance staff. I don't have that number of how much is coming from res versus non-res in terms of the tax base. The average C of A number that we do have, though, that has been looked at from the strictly single family detached dwelling unit. So it strips out the multi-residential from there. So the 180 that we have is a modified number to reflect that exact figure that you're talking about. So there, and I guess I'll just point to some of the variations that you are speaking of are you're accurate on. It's the two variables at play. It's the tax part and then the utility consumption part that somewhat are similar, but obviously move in different ways slightly as the impact, because it does depend on the assessment base and the consumption pattern. So the bill impact will be a direct result of how much that specific household is using and their assessed value of their property. So it's a two variable system here that you have to draw the impact to.
Well, and so we're only, this gives us a snapshot into about half our population, over half our population would own their homes. And about 47%, I think it is, that rent. So some would be in single family homes or duplex, whatever, but a lot with multi-res. So the impact there obviously is going to be different. So, yeah. And so I think it'd be interesting to see the other numbers, how they weigh out. And I guess we also have the ability to potentially mitigate the impact on residential taxpayers if we chose to, simply with the tax rate. So the reduction could be a little bit more on the individual residential taxpayer to offset potential higher costs there. So a lot more analysis needed anyway, I guess.
Councillor Miller?
I think this is just bringing up more questions than answers for me. I keep looking at sensitivity test number 3 with the low CVA and thinking about the people that might live in those places and you know the impact of $366 increase. So it's just that some of this isn't sitting very well with me, and I know we don't have all the answers yet.
Rebecca?
It's also what data did you incorporate when it came to, you didn't incorporate our asset management plan to understand the additional expenses that will hit our water and wastewater expenses in the future. So as an example, I guess, did you include the future financing of the water tower, the major trunk main upgrades? I assume you didn't include the discussion we had last week on wastewater or water pollution control plan. So a lot of factors which are going to impact either this tax subsidy getting bigger or the water rates getting bigger in the future.
Through the mayor, that's correct. We based it on the 2021 rate study and the rate increases that were identified there. And to keep it somewhat consistent, we had to then take the rates and then strip out inflation from it. So we had to kind of baseline it as a 2025 rate analysis in $2025 to kind of do the comparison properly with the assessment side of things in terms of your current taxation structure. So that was so anything that comes on new above the rate study requirements, that would be an add-on to the rate impacts, but neutral from the sensitivity test perspective, right? Because you'd have to look at what the rate impact would be under the base case, and then presumably that same rate impact would also be required under the alternative structure as well, right? So, but to the point, there's more things that might need to be added into the mix here to do the proper analysis over the longer term.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Councillor Brennan? Yeah, thanks for this. It's pretty complicated, and just a question. I know this has been discussed for quite a long time, and I've been here quite a long time, and it's always been termed that this requirement to be revenue neutral was going to be enacted provincially through regulation, and I don't believe that's happened officially yet.
There's always the requirement that municipalities have to fund their system and their services and move towards cost recovery. Whether that requirement is to completely make sure that it's all self-funded, we haven't seen anything like that. Like I said, there are some municipalities like yourselves that still do operate with a tax levy support. But I would say the encouragement at least continues to be to move municipalities to a fully funded system from the utility rates if they can do so.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that we're in the minority in that regard. I'd be interested to know what our neighbors close by, similar population sizes, whatnot, how are they revenue neutral, and how what do their water rates look like? I mean, it's going to be, it seems to me that this is going to happen eventually here. It's just a matter of how we're going to mitigate on the tax side. And as the mayor just mentioned, producing water and taking care of wastewater is about to get a bit more expensive here in the coming years. So starting next year. So it's a good start, I think, but I think there's a lot more work to do.
I've got a question. I guess it's just when we look at our impact values have been frozen for years now. And when we go to set our tax rate, we know we've got residents that are assessed at a value way more than what's fair for them to be paying for the amount of house they have. And we've got residents that are paying way less than what would be fair to pay for what their house would be worth in the market. But we don't dig into it that deeply. We look at what the average assessment's worth. We look at what the average assessment's worth. We look at what we got to pay for, and then we come up with the tax rate that way, more or less. So for this, like, I appreciate diving into the data this much, but at the end of the day, if the water costs X and we're subsidizing it by Y, it's going to have different impacts on different households. But at the end of the day, the right thing to do is to have the water pay for the water and the taxes pay for the tax, what the taxes are supposed to be paying for. And I'm just not sure, as much as we can analyze this, the tax rate can come down roughly 3%. The water bills are going to go up to do the difference, and we're either going to do that or we're not going to do that. So I'm not sure I understand the value in all of the analysis or further analysis in it. I think it's either a priority or it's not a priority, I guess. And I don't know, every single person in town is going to be affected by it slightly differently, but overall, I think we've got to look at it at a high level, the same as we do for the tax rate. So maybe I'm really missing something. I don't know. I spent most of my time on CIP and HCD this weekend. So, Mayor Panko?
Well, of the three possibilities here from a revenue standpoint, so fixed tax rate we determine, base rate we determine, the rate we apply to usage we determine, but the user determines how much water they use. So they have so that's the one area of all of this they have an opportunity to impact through actions they can take within their own behaviors or even things they can do in their home to reduce the amount of water that they are consuming. So there is an opportunity to offset some of the increase individually if people want to make that choice. But overall, I think it's a very effective exercise. My personal feeling is we need to get to equilibrium, and whether that's this year, and I say this stage, I'm not opposed to considering the possibility of 1 year if we can rip the Band-Aid off and get it done. But how do we mitigate the potential impact on those who may be hit the most? And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, this is an analysis on just residential based on a few scenarios of property values. We have a lot of revenue coming in from both tax and water from institutional, commercial, and industrial, and multi-res, which isn't even part of this. So the direct impact on the citizens who are renting their homes is going to be different because it's going to be the balance there is paid for by either the property owner, obviously the landlord, in a multi-res, and if it's fairly similar, they're writing off both in all cases, either way. And then it's going to be the commercial industrial users, which are also going to be impacted. We don't know yet. But again, it's a cost of doing business in those situations. It's not the same as a residential taxpayer who's on a fixed income, who's going to have a $300 more to pay each year. So I think, as I mentioned a little while ago, if we get further analysis here, I think we have the opportunity to potentially mitigate the pain on those who may feel the most. And that would be by how we set the tax rate to how we take that reduction in savings and how we apply it. If we decide we're going to apply it directly to the residential taxpayers, everybody will walk away a little bit less. I'm not saying that's what we do, but it gives us an example of how we could actually apply the reduction in taxes. So I do think we need more analysis, but I'm not sure. We also don't have a lot of time to make a decision on this.
Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, that was going to be my point, Chair. we're getting to the point of the year where we need to set the water and the wastewater rates so that we can bill accordingly. So I'm not sure when that point of time is, but it seems to me it's coming up pretty quick.
C.O. Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would answer that question by saying in years past, we've been typically approving the budget in late January, early February. If it goes beyond the first part of February, we would bring forward a separate bylaw to set the water and wastewater rates so we can apply them retroactive to January. The budget we presented last week is based on a rate increase effective January 1st. We can change that, of course, but it changes the calculus within the budget.
So I could look to Director Dauber, C.O. Morris. Even if we were to do more analysis, what are we looking for next budget cycle to have that information? Or like what's our timelines and what kind of direction should we give?
Yeah, so I guess I would turn to Andrew to see just how long it would take. The further analysis is going to take more time. This was a week and a half, and so it was rather rushed analysis. And as we learned, it's a slice of our consumers, not everyone. So, that's probably a couple of months to do that properly and then come up with a recommended implementation strategy. Mm-hmm. So if the desire was to implement in 26, we would have to set rates for the first part of 26 and then change them partway through 26. Alternatively, if we took 26 to study it with an implementation of 27, we could start in January. It's cleaner to start in January, but not necessary, I don't think. I'll look to Mr. Dauber.
It certainly would, as C.O. Morris said, sorry through the chair, that it would be tidier. It would give the public a little more of an opportunity to look at what the results are and what their impact may be. It's also easier administratively if we start getting into changing rates partway through the year. It can be done. It can certainly be done, but it would be quite cumbersome.
So is there consensus from committee to keep doing the research in preparation for the 2027 budget? I'm seeing nodding heads. Yeah. Councillor McKenna? Well,
I agree. I think getting the next bit of information research, I think, is relatively straightforward. It might take a couple months or 3 months. It's the implementation that C.O. Morris talked about. I think that's where the sensitivity is for me, is you're looking at people who are just getting by with the biggest tax rate increases and with that impact could come in 2027 as well. Who knows? And then but I'm interested in knowing more, learning more, and following these for 2027. That makes sense.
So is that clear direction on the next steps for analysis? Okay, great. No further questions for Andrew. All right, well, thank you for joining us tonight, Andrew. I appreciate your presentations, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks very much. Have a great night.
We'll go to our 20-year waste management master plan with Director McMillan.
Hi.
Ikuda.
She should be. Shall we begin? Corresponding with her. Thank you. Can you hear us, Kathy?
Yes, now I can. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Good evening, members of council. The report that my department has in front of you this evening is with respect to the draft 20-year waste management master plan. So everybody's had a chance to look at this. I got Kathy Radon with us here this evening from Dillon Consulting Limited to present their findings of the exercise of working on this draft policy document, this waste management master plan. So as I mentioned before, it's a 20-year plan to look out to the horizon here locally in Smith Falls. And I'm just going to read a little excerpt from the analysis and options, because I think this really sums it up well in terms of what this plan looked to achieve. The Waste Management Master Plan assignment focused on developing a strategic framework for the town to guide improvements in solid waste management to establish a financially sustainable and resilient system that supports the local population and develops growth while enhancing environmental stewardship and overall quality of life for the town residents. That's a mouthful, but that's effectively what this assignment looked to achieve. So you'll see three recommendations on page 1 at the top this evening. We're looking for council to pass a resolution to receive and accept the draft plan as it's documented, and further that council direct staff to action any one or all of the 11 recommendations that came out of the plan, which will be further presented by Kathy here shortly. So those 11 recommendations were a result of public consultation, looking at best practices, what other municipalities do, and what we've done here locally in Smith Falls for in previous years. And effectively what makes sense for moving forward into 2026 and beyond for the state of what solid waste management looks like here for the town. Lastly, and it was presented in the operating budget, that council directs staff to engage non-eligible source location property owners. So those would be the commercial properties that we have around town. We have approximately 220 properties to propose agreements to ensure cost recovery by the town for the continued curbside collection of non-eligible source materials, recycling, if you will, as presented in the report presented here this evening. So trusting that makes sense. Historically, through our curbside collection of recycling, our contractor GIM has collected curbside recycling from properties around town, the residential properties, as well as some commercial properties around town, notably businesses within the DBA, the Downtown Business Association area on Beckwith Street and adjacent to provide them with curbside collection, only for the simple fact that a number of those properties don't have room on site for dumpsters or bins because they have a building and a parking lot, and that's about it. So not enough room for them to self-manage their own recycling. Not only that, but in the downtown core, it's difficult to try to differentiate between what's business generated recycling and what's generated from residential properties up above those businesses. So those are the properties that we're looking at with this third part of the recommendation here this evening. If council will recall, some time ago, it would have been back in the summer in July, you received a report with respect to what the financial impacts would be for a cost recovery to have agreements with those properties that provide or that generate recycling, the non-eligible source materials. And as it stands right now with our contract with GIM, which has been approved by council for GIM to provide that service, we're looking at around just shy of $72,000 with net HST to provide that service to those 220, I'll say plus, because there could be a couple other stragglers out there. We still have to do a very comprehensive assessment on which properties are going to be affected. So the agreement that we would be looking to put in place would be when we take the collection fees plus the fee that is being charged by GIM for the price per ton. We've worked it out predicated on 220 properties that the price would be about $27.25 per month per property for collection services. That said, I was discussing this with staff today, and it would make sense that we would charge that flat fee per month, and then at the end of the year, we do a reconciliation based on the actual tonnage fees, so the price could go marginally up or down at the end of the 12-month period. Meaning if properties had overpaid, they would have I would presume we would maybe perhaps administer that through a credit for the following year. or if they hadn't paid enough, that they would, on their first bill of the following year, they would have to make up that difference. So with that, I'm not going to chat a whole lot more. I'm happy to turn it over to Kathy so she can present the findings of some of our public engagement that we did. She's going to talk about best practices locally here in Smith Falls, what makes sense going forward. And like I said, there's 10 recommendations that came out of the report, and the very last one being the 11th is what we just talked about, that collection from those 220 properties. So without further ado, I'm happy to turn it over to Kathy Radon from Dillon Consulting. The floor is yours, Kathy.
Kathy, if you want to stop sharing your screen, then we'd be able to see you, and I'm happy to advance your slides. I have the presentation up.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you let me know if it's up now? I don't.
It's up, yep.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. So yeah, I'll be speaking today about our waste management master plan that we prepared for Smith Falls. If we can just advance the next one, please. So yeah, just we'll talk about the project that we did. I was the project manager for this project, and we'll really follow through around the 3 phases of the project. Where is Smith Falls now in terms of waste management, and then emissions coming out of that. So if we can go on. And as Paul was saying, the purpose was to develop a 20-year waste management master plan to guide the town in implementing sustainable waste management practices into the future. Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Could we advance the slide, please?
Okay, I'm at the 3 phases.
There we go. Okay, thanks. So the first, we looked at understanding the service levels that are offered now, the historical quantities, and then looking at the influencing factors of where things are going in the industry and how we're going to get there. So if we keep going to the next, so where are we at now? So if we take a look, right now, the town is providing service to about 4,000 single-family properties, about 1,000 multi-residential units, which is about 50 buildings, and 6 town-owned facilities, as well as the 220 businesses that were mentioned. Services include weekly curbside collection, curbside collection of large items and metal goods, biannual curbside collection and drop-off of yard waste and brush, biannual swap days, which is a fairly unique thing where people can leave stuff out for other people to take. So it's a great reuse program, as well as promotional educational materials, such as the calendar. So the Blue Box recycling transition is a really significant change that has just taken place, or just about to take place fully on January 1st. So this means, as has already been said, that residential collection will be the responsibility of producers. Producers will be operating the recycling system, they'll be responsible for collection, and this really takes the Blue Box program out of the hands of municipalities across the province. For industrial, commercial, and institutional facilities, businesses, small businesses, the regulation does not fully cover, so those 222 would cease receiving service from the town according to the regulation, and producers would not be required to provide that service. A different private operator will collect the recycling Blue Box materials on behalf of the producers, and will also be responsible for the boxes themselves and for inquiries, public inquiries. So that sort of sets the stage. And then let's look at the quantities and the performance of the town. So over the past 5 years, the town sent about 2,800 tons of waste to landfill annually. That's about 302 kilograms per person. So quite a significant weight, but not out of proportion with what we see in other jurisdictions. If we look at the past 5 years, the town's annual residential diversion rate, so this means the percentage of materials that are being collected as waste but are not going to landfill, they're diverted elsewhere, it's at 27%. That is lower than what you see in a lot of other jurisdictions. And that's really because of the absence of an organics program, curbside organics program. The black bar at the top of this bar graph is showing the portion that's coming from IC&I sector. So it's about 2%, just under 2% of the total waste. So that's inclusive of the garbage, recycling, everything. But it's obviously much smaller with a smaller number of pickup locations. We can go to the next. This is from a audit of waste, meaning the garbage. So in July 2024, and this is likely fairly typical. About a quarter of what is being thrown out as garbage is actually organic waste. So there's a fair bit of composition, and there's still also a fair bit of recycling that's not going into the blue box that people are putting in their garbage. So that shows sort of a snapshot of what's happening right now in terms of what services are provided and what's going on in terms of the quantities. We'll take a look next at where things are headed. So we can look at the emerging trends and policies, and the really key point here is some urgency. The 1st of December, Waste to Resources Ontario released a report that really highlighted the scarcity of landfill across the province. In Ontario, there's 7 key landfills that account for 57% of the available capacity. So there's not many landfills that have any real significant space in them. Across Ontario, just over a quarter of the waste is actually going into the US for disposal as of 2024. So if we take that and assume that the status quo continues in terms of how much is being generated per community, per household, then Ontario will be depleted of landfill capacity by 2037. And if it so happens that we cannot send waste to the US anymore, the landfills in Ontario would be depleted by 2034. So that's a trend across Ontario, also across Canada, I should mention. And the other trend is that the population of Smith Falls is growing, meaning more waste. I have on this graph 5-year increments of population growth using the land needs study for Smith Falls. It's 1.56% population growth annually. So if we're looking to the long term and to have a sustainable waste management system over the course of the long term, this is something that needs to be thought about. Of course, the other trend that I've spoken to is blue box. So the quantities here are reflective of all waste, but blue box is not the most significant portion. Garbage is the most significant portion. And there's some uncertainty with such the extent of the change of going to producer extended responsibility, that the town will no longer be responsible for blue box. That throws a little bit of uncertainty into the quantities as we've been seeing them from the historical data. I'll also mention the Food and Organic Waste Framework, which was put out by the province in 2018. That's really providing direction and showing importance of organics programs in Ontario, but I should mention that that's not regulation. Ontario provided a framework encouraging many municipalities to move towards organics programs. Targets that were included in that were based on population density. So there's no requirement, statutory requirement, to have organics diversion. And then the last trend that I'll mention, unfortunately, is that across the board, we're just seeing rising costs in waste service contracts, in the operating costs when it's done in-house. This is related to things like the cost of fuel, of materials, cost of labor. We're seeing it basically across the board. Okay, so if we take those historical quantities and we relate that with the population, then I'm just showing here the increase, projected increase. So by 2050, 5,750 tons. This is inclusive of the diverted materials. So the green portion of the bar is representative of all of the diverted materials, including blue box organics, but that's a negligible quantity. Leaf and yard waste and household hazardous waste, which are smaller quantities. Next slide. So as part of putting together the master plan, we also looked to the public, and I had a virtual open house with great attendance from local community groups, as well as an online survey. And we had fabulous participation in that too. We had 85 responses, which is more than what we've seen from larger jurisdictions that we've worked with sometimes. So some of the feedback that we gathered is these keywords. The bigger the word, the more people related and provided that feedback. So sustainable, clean, efficient, compost, those are some of the really key things that were of importance to the people in Smith Falls. From that, we created our vision statement that we envision leading, or we as in Smith Falls, envisions leading in sustainable waste management by prioritizing efficiency and accessibility and fostering a zero waste culture through reducing, reusing, and recycling to preserve our environment for future generations. So that's where we're going. Then the question is, how do we get there? In the master plan, as Paul said, we have 11 recommendations, including the one with respect to cost recovery for blue bin locations that are not serviced by producers. I've just put them in 3 groups here for our purposes today. The first is new and adjusted curbside collection programs. So there's opportunity at points when a collection contract is being recreated, or when a term ends, to think about what is going to happen with the next curbside collection contract. So these ones are related to that. And curbside organics waste collection is one, biweekly garbage collection, reduced garbage bag limits, and clear garbage bag program. So those are sort of a suite of recommendations because they would fit together and because they're related to how waste is collected and what that agreement is with the service provider. Other recommendations are related to waste reduction and diversion programs, including mattress recycling program, implementing reuse and repair programs, expanding backyard composting, waste composition tracking and education. So making sure that the data is there to understand benchmarks in the future and to monitor how things are changing. Public space waste strategy, so thinking about what happens in parks in particular. And then recommendations related to this producer responsibility. So collaboration and advocacy, ways to advanced producer responsibility, and the cost recovery for blue box collection from non-eligible sources, meaning the 220 approximately buildings or collection points that are not covered under the blue bin regulation. Okay, so for that first suite of recommendations, key benefits really are around diverting more from the landfill, encouraging participation in the green bin program, changing resident behavior, and really bringing down those waste quantities from households. As I mentioned, these would be a suite because they would be interrelated. If you have a curbside organics collection program, biweekly garbage collection is much more palatable to the public because they don't have the stuff in their garbage bag that is smelly and that they need to get rid of more immediately. So those could coincide and be planned in such a way that they complement each other. Reducing garbage bag limits would be suggesting that instead of 2 bags, which is now allowed, people would be allowed to set 1 bag at the curb. And the clear garbage bag program has been very successful in other jurisdictions. The way that works is that for your garbage to be collected, it needs to be set in a clear bag at the curb. And this instills different behavior in the public. If people are putting things in the garbage that ought to be in the recycling, it's very visible to their neighbors. So this tends to have an impact. And that's what we've seen with other municipalities that we've worked with. So in terms of costs, we have some ballpark figures, and a lot of these initial estimations is really about how much time it would take for staff to go through and review bylaws, understand what you would receive in a collection contract in terms of market, where the market's at, and feasibility, and also more consultation with the public for these fairly significant changes to the services. Okay. So we'll take a look at the next bunch. A mattress recycling program is another diversion tactic that's been used in other jurisdictions. Mattresses are so bulky, so they become very difficult to manage in a landfill. And also, Smith Falls doesn't own its own landfill, but transporting mattresses can be difficult because they're so bulky. Some jurisdictions have a fee. Sometimes it's about $30 for residents to pay to have their mattress picked up and recycled. It's estimated that your cost for recycling each unit, being each mattress or box spring, would be about $40. And that there would also be some staff time to prepare that program and form the collection agreement and this sort of thing. Reuse and repair programs are, they don't require a huge effort to start up. There is already quite an engaged population and local organizations and charities in Smith Falls, so really leveraging what's going on is a good approach to that, that kind of work of increasing reuse and repair. Expanding the backyard composting program that already exists is also a fairly easy to do recommendation. And of course, that has potential to increase the longevity of landfill space because so much organics is already being generated and put into the garbage. Waste composition tracking and education is very important as well. It's been typical across Ontario that diversion rates are used to compare and to identify what performance is. But with the Blue Box program going to producers, what that means is that the data is not in the hands of those jurisdictions. So it's harder. There's no consistent methodology anymore where municipalities would be understanding their recycling performance and reporting that through a consistent methodology. So getting some good data on waste and understanding the per capita disposal rate, which is an important metric, and the total waste disposed per year, that's also a really best practice and really critical at this time of transition and change. Public space waste management strategy. So coming up with more ideas around what to do, particularly in Smith Falls with parks, because of increased park use and as well because of this transition with extended producer responsibility and the blue box. So really doing a deeper dive into what's happening now in parks and what can be done to manage waste in future years. So the next. So collaboration and advocacy for extended producer. So these last two are related to extended producer responsibility. And collaboration and advocacy is important because all Ontario jurisdictions are going through the same thing at the same time. And reducing costs could be possible if there were more things that could be covered with producer responsibility. So for example, mattresses, if that could be covered and if the producers of these things can take them back in some way or other kinds of take back programs so that certain waste items don't have to be managed at all anymore in the garbage stream and can be, taken out, and particularly things that are costing a lot to manage now, like those bulky items. And then finally, the cost recovered for blue box collection from non-eligible sources. So this would be to continue to do that investigation into whether the town could cover its own costs for continuing to provide blue box collection in the downtown or in other IC&I locations. So the master plan includes a timeline as well. It looks like this. So you can see quite a bit to do fairly soon in terms of starting this planning and then implementing over the longer course of time. PP is suggesting that the planning period for starting to look at these recommendations, and then IP is the implementation period of when that would actually start up. So the critical thing here too for the first four, as I think I've mentioned, is that 2027 is when the current collection contract ends. And then there are 2 additional optional years that could be exercised. Thinking about those 4 immediately would allow some time because developing a collection contract is a considerable amount of work. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kathy. I've got a question if nobody, I don't see any hands up. I was surprised to see that fibers were 5% of the non-waste and second only to the 1 and 2 plastics. Are there municipalities that have programs for fiber recycling? Because whenever I've got fibers to get rid of, it seems hard to figure out where they should go.
So just for clarity, by fiber in that audit, we mean paper.
Okay, not clothing.
Not clothing, no. Okay. And you're right, textiles are a difficult thing. There's not a lot of options. I guess there are some stores, you sometimes see a box that you can take back jeans, for example, but textile recycling is very difficult because of zippers and buttons and the kind of labor intensity that would be required to get those things shredded. And then it's sort of about the economy too, you know.
So based on it's part of the 54% waste.
Yes, it's included in the waste.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and thanks so much for your presentation and all of this work. You know, I think this is all important to get done. I think what surprised me a little bit was in the time frame planning. It seems really heavy in the work in the next couple of years, and then not so much in the 15 to 18 years past that. And so if I were able to kind of push out any of this, I'm hesitant on items 2 and 3, the biweekly garbage and reduced garbage bag limits. I think if we start some of the other work ahead of that and push those numbers 2 and 3 a little bit further out, it might be an easier transition for our residents. So that's just my take on it.
If, Chair, if I could, the idea of the biweekly garbage collection, as Kathy mentioned earlier, is kind of predicated on the adoption of a green bin program, meaning if we're able to take that wet waste or that green waste, kitchen scraps, et cetera, out of the garbage, that really truly does reduce the overall volume and weight of that garbage. So that's kind of where we thought if that program were implemented, then it may stand to make sense that we go to a biweekly collection, but not only that we at that point could consider a reduction of the 2 bags that people are able to put out now weekly, reduce that something down to something less. So something less than 2 would be 1. So that's kind of the thought, and that's all that to say that a couple of these things are predicated on the adoption of a green bin program.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with most of it. The one question I do have, though, is the clear bag, garbage bag use. I don't use garbage bags. I put it in a bin. I find that adding more plastic just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me anyway. When we had our cottage in Reed Lakes Township, they do, you've got to put your stuff in, your recycling anyway, in clear. But they still allow you to put your garbage in your in a bin. So is that going to be something that we're going to be looking at as a mandatory thing, or?
Well, again, subject to council endorsement for that part of the program. But Kathy, maybe if I could turn to you to speak to what if that's a challenge for other municipalities that have adopted that, or if it's a fairly straightforward, easy transition.
Yeah, there are a few that have recently made this transition. So Greater Sudbury is an example, District of Muskoka is another example, Aurelia. And yes, the bylaw would need to be updated and people would be responsible for setting their garbage out in just a clear bag. So their previous existing garbage cans would become obsolete, or maybe they could use them in their backyard for another purpose. Or for leaf and yard waste or something like that. The Clear Bag program's success, though, has been observed that it does sort of make this psychological difference to people that if they do put their garbage out in a clear bag, they just put less out. That's what we've seen in the data in those jurisdictions that have adopted this.
Thanks for that. Just follow up. Well, I won't be supporting that because the people who do put their garbage out in bags, every morning on Tuesday morning, something's been into damn near every one of them. So, and the people collecting the garbage don't pick the garbage up, like off the ground. They'll pick what's left in the bag, but they don't clean up. So for me, I'm not in favor of that, but I'm in favor of just about everything else.
Marpenko?
Yeah, thanks, Paul and Kat. This is obviously very meaningful, especially when we see our landfills filling up in the next decade or so. And disappointing to see diversion rates falling. So I think I go back to the study somewhere in there mentioned, I think it was 15 years ago roughly, when it was, the plan was to get, I think, to 50% within a certain number of years, and instead we're going more the opposite way. And the volume of recycled material, which is still going in landfill, is obviously around 20%, so very concerning as well. But I like the initiatives that you've outlined. Organic collection, something that I think has been simmering here for a while. We just haven't got to it. I think part of it was waiting for this report, and I fully support that. But it's 25% of our waste, probably more than that from a weight standpoint. We have an opportunity to really create a lot more diversion. It's the only question I guess relates to, do we need to take 2 years to plan for it? Here we are in 2025. Looks like we're taking 26 and 27 to figure it out and implement in 28. Is there reasoning behind that, or are there initiatives here that could be initiated and maybe take the next year to get it all figured out and in place and start in 2027?
I can grab that one, Kathy. So as Kathy noted before, that our contract with GIM run to the end of 2027. So it seemed to make sense to align with that, albeit we do have provisions in our most recent contract with GIM to that we can implement a green bin program without any penalty. The other thing that we were cognizant of is the fact that in 2026 we're into a municipal election. Again, that would be council's prerogative if this is something that we wanted to advance during this term of council, or something that we wanted to particularly maybe staff get working on it, but to try to do the groundwork prior to a new council coming in the fall of 2026, and be staged to present that to the new folks sitting around the horseshoe for implementation once they're in term. Just a thought I had from
Councillor Brennan. Yeah, thank you. Just one question and then some comments. Residential garbage is one component of landfills. The other component is industrial commercial. And my understanding was that component of landfill is the vast majority of landfill. Is that correct, or is that in the past?
We'll look to Kathy in that with her other jurisdictions she works with.
Yes. So for clarity, IC&I waste, there is significant volumes, but when I was mentioning that in the presentation, it's a less than 2% because municipalities often don't manage IC&I waste at all. So typically a municipal jurisdiction would be involved in waste management for small businesses, for schools, for churches, whereas much of the IC&I sector waste is not at all touched by municipal jurisdictions. So I think that's where that that idea comes, that there's a lot more IC&I waste on the whole, but in terms of it's the proportion of IC&I that's part of what Smith Falls would manage, it's quite small.
Okay. The other, a comment, and I totally agree on the clear garbage bag point. I mean, it's just common sense, and you're right. Every week, it's anybody with a bag, it's all over the place. And the other comment I would have is some of this stuff is pretty drastic change. And I think that the normal Joe homeowner expects a few things from the municipality. Clean the snow, which we do a great job of. Clean water out of my tap, and pick up my garbage. And so this is a pretty core service that I'm looking at some drastic changes. I'm not saying that I'm totally against them, but I do agree with Director that this sort of idea needs to be put to the public. and certainly is will be talked about in the election come next fall. And I think that's a good idea to let that process play out. In the meantime, there's no harm in looking at some of these ideas and shape of what they might look at, so we can have a clearer picture for when that time comes next October. So that's my comment.
Through the chair, I just wanted to mention that that this was a vision statement in the strategic plan that we pursue environmental sustainability and climate adaptation. So that's part of the reason why this study was supported by council in the first place. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Brennan, that there might be some low-hanging fruit here that we can pick away at prior to the election next fall, if you will. And certain things certainly that we can push down the line as long as we still have our radar on them. That's something that this council is interested in and the future council is interested in. We can certainly get to work on any or all or most of those 11 recommendations.
Councillor McKenna?
Yeah, thank you. It's surprisingly simple, like what we're asking for. These are not, like, if I understand it, then it's pretty straightforward. And I got all 11. They make sense. They're pretty low cost as well. And they're quite doable. So I'm supporting them. And one of the things I liked about the Dillon report was that you've kind of standardized, I'm assuming, your impact on greenhouse gas emissions. There's a column that you automatically look at that. So I was really appreciative to see that column on what each initiative could or couldn't do for our bigger environmental question. And I'm hoping many of our reports going forward are going to have that column in, that lens that we could, council will understand if we make this decision or this decision, the impact on the environment. So I like that. And I'm assuming that's baked into your business model now. Yeah. So yeah. I found easy read, straightforward recommendations. I think the public understand it. Glad to hear the public participation in this. And I think, as Councillor Brennan said, I think the public will have more to say. Let's put the message out and encourage people to continue talking about this.
Mapinko?
Yeah, Kathy, can you give examples of where you've done this before, maybe within Eastern Ontario in recent years? I mean, I understand it's somewhat disruptive, it's a big change, but we're not the first to go down this road. And I think people would adapt quite quickly. I agree public consultation is important, get some feedback, but I also think it's a decision this council can make. I don't think we need to punt it forward and leave it to the next council. The sooner we make the changes that I believe are necessary, the sooner we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, the sooner we're going to move towards reducing our overall waste. So just some ideas of how this has gone elsewhere.
Absolutely, yes. I think what I would suggest is that pairing the introduction of a new organics program with the curbside collection, those changes is really, really typical of what we see in other jurisdictions. So, if you're adjusting the collection contract, that's the opportunity to think about those programs and when, make the changes in sync with one another. Other examples, so for example, larger cities like City of Ottawa, City of Toronto, the big ones for sure have done waste strategies like this. And then smaller as Greater Sudbury more recently. And then Brant, Haldimand County, Bradford, I believe, was another one that recently looked at these kinds of recommendations.
And do you have any idea the percentage of Ontario municipalities, urban municipalities, that are doing organic collection, curbside organic collections now?
Yeah, I would say Smith Falls is a smaller community compared to most that have implemented it. We are seeing some uptake in the East Coast now in smaller communities. But I will mention again the policy statement from the province in 2018. It did give targets for what communities should be reaching in terms of organics diversion. And the benchmarks for those targets, the population benchmarks, are not present for communities that are currently as small as Smith Falls. What you do want to think about, though, is also the growth that you're experiencing too. So you sort of want to think about both ways. But it's, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's not mandatory. And there's no associated provincial target in terms of how much you should be hitting for organic waste.
Thanks again. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Perth has been doing organics collections for quite a while.
Yeah.
So maybe some feedback from there. But I guess if at this stage, obviously we're not making a decision on when we would implement, but I'd like to maybe move to the next stage would be getting some public feedback, whether that's through open house, through surveys, whatever we end up doing this. And certainly accepting the report, and I would say hopefully they'll plan to implement recommendations.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. I personally do not think that this should be put off because of the election. I think this is a decision that has to be made whenever it's, and we need to get working on it now for many reasons. One being that we need to be looking after our environment, and we are producing way too much garbage. As I sit here with this cup, and I think how many of these are used every day, myself included, and put into the garbage. You know what? So maybe there's a whole program that we could get going with companies like this where, okay, we get a discount in our tea that we just bought because we've brought our own mug. There's all kinds of things. This is going to be a real educational that's going to have to go on for a long while. We've got to educate people. We really do. And yes, our taxpayers do want garbage pickup. Totally agree they do. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be putting limits on what they are throwing in the garbage. I agree with Councillor Robinson about using a garbage can rather than bags, but maybe that's not always convenient, I'm not sure. But using the clear bags, people can see what you've now thrown out, and people will be very aware of what they're throwing out. So I think the clear bags certainly will make a big difference. And let's get at this. Let's stop throwing so much away. We're terrible to throw out. And I'll say, like my household, we usually have maybe half a bag of garbage a week. And there's 3 of us there. I know other people that have households that are no bigger than mine, and I see them putting out 2 bags of garbage a week. So it's educating people, and it has to start here with us as we start making changes. And this was a really good report. A lot of good information in there, a lot of good directions, and I thank you for that. You know, how we do implement all this. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to mention that when we talk about the reduction of weekly set out of garbage bags and or moving to a biweekly collection, that would still not preclude somebody from putting out additional bags as long as they're tagged. Now we could look at putting a cap on that biweekly collection. That is it 1 additional bag? Is it 2? Is it 3 or 4? That's something that we need to investigate as well. But I just wanted to make that clear for the folks at home. We're not talking about you can only put 1 bag out every 2 weeks. We would still have that provision of buying bag tags as we do now for anything over 2 bags.
That's perfect.
Councillor McKenna.
Well, just building on Councillor Quinn's comment, let's get going. I've read the staff recommendations. There are 3 parts, and I'm ready to move forward if council is in supporting them.
Okay, so we've got Mayor Panko suggesting we go to the public, get some feedback, and accept the report. Councillor McKenna is ready to accept the report and the recommendations. Just a show of hands, how many people are ready to accept the recommendations tonight? Okay, so we have a consensus for that. I think I'll just make some comments then. I was surprised, I was really surprised to see that 45% of the waste could be diverted and it's not being diverted. I thought we were doing a better job than that. For organic waste, I'm really excited to see the opportunity for curbside collection, because once I got my food cycler, the odor, all the reasons I was putting my garbage out went away. And now maybe once a month I put in a little, like a grocery store bag out. So I think that big opportunity there. I think for the clear bags, I hear Councillor Robinson's issues with it, and I'm wondering, like, there's got to be a way to make a clear garbage can now to get the same effect. I don't like the idea of having to buy bags if you don't have to buy them. But I think the other thing too is that if we have to go in that direction, and if there's really good case studies to push us in that direction, I want to see them so I can defend the policy. But I also if we push delivery time back to 9 a.m. instead of having it start at 6, 7 in the morning, then people aren't putting them out the night before, and then the animals have less chance to get into them, and maybe we solve some problems there. So I think a lot of these things are workable. And I think when we're looking at, it seems like every capital project that's coming to us now has an 8-figure number. The debate for this is very similar to the debate for the water. Should the people that are putting out more garbage pay for the garbage, or should everybody be subsidizing the garbage for everybody else? And I think that the garbage goes down when you have to pay for it as much as nobody wants to pay for it. So these are the kind of hard decisions we're going to have to make, the way things cost these days. So I support the recommendations and appreciate the report. Councillor Brennan.
I'm just thinking with the clear garbage bag, say everyone has a kitchen catcher right under the sink. So you have to have a clear kitchen catcher, or, I mean, you don't.
No.
You can put the white bag in the clear bag.
Do it every week. Clear bag.
Okay. Just a technical question.
Yeah.
I mean,
all right.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just looking for, I guess, confirmation. So council is supportive of the 10 recommendations presented in the report, plus the third recommendation on page number 1, which speaks to the non-eligible source locations, and that we're going to look to recover those expenses. I just wanted to be clear on that. Is that the direction given this evening?
Agreed. Okay. So there's consensus for all 3 as recommended at the top of the report. Okay, great. Any last questions, comments? Great. Thank you for joining us tonight, Kathy, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bye.
So that brings us to our in-camera sessions. I'll take a motion to go in camera, moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor McKenna. The Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls is provided in Section 239 of the Municipal Act as amended, moving into a closed meeting at 7:30 p.m. to discuss a litigation matter. All in favor? That's carried. right, council gave staff direction for 2 in-camera items, and seeing nothing else on our agenda, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Brennan, seconded by Councilor Robinson. All those in favor? So we'll adjourn our proceedings at 8:49 and remain so adjourned until the next duly called committee of the whole meeting.
And a brief Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Smiths Falls Town Council for Monday, December 15th, 2025. On December 15th, 2025, we acknowledge the sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. I'm also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history, our nation building for peace and friendship, be mindful of generations to come. Call the meeting to order at 8:52 p.m. The approval of the agenda is with Councillor Quinn, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that the December 15th, 2025 regular council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Quinn, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that the December 15th, 2025 regular council meeting agenda be approved as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. As for disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest and general nature thereof, I see none. Approval of minutes with Councillor McGuire, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Robinson that the minutes of the December 1st, 2025 council meeting be approved and circulated.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McGuire, seconded by Councillor Robinson that the minutes of the December 1st, 2025 council meeting be approved as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Anyone have any reports this evening? No. I've got just one proclamation myself, and that is Alzheimer's Awareness Month for January 2026. Whereas each January, the Alzheimer's Society supports and leads Canada's Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Whereas during this month, the Alzheimer's Society encourages organizations across Canada and individuals to learn more about dementia and its stark impact on Canadians. Whereas while our Alzheimer's Awareness Month may stop at the end of January, the experiences of people who live with dementia does not. Whereas by understanding what people living with dementia experience in their day-to-day lives, their struggles, their successes, and their hopes, together we can raise awareness of dementia throughout Canada. And whereas awareness is the first step to fighting stigma, reinforcing human rights, and pushing for policy change, as well as other actions that can lift up Canadians living with dementia. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Sean Panko, on behalf of the Council and Corporation of Town of Smiths Falls, hereby proclaim January 2026 as Alzheimer's Awareness Month in the Town of Smiths Falls, and further, the bandstand and municipal complex will be illuminated in blue for the month of January in recognition of Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Okay, moving forward with our agenda, the consent agenda, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Quinn, that items on consent report 17, 2025 received from the clerk be received and adopted.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Quinn, that items in consent report number 17-2025 received from the clerk be received and adopted. Clerk Costello.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's one bylaw this evening on the consent agenda, and that's to adopt the accessibility plan from 2025 to 2030. We have the resolution for the rural transit feasibility study to receive that report. Also, a resolution to receive the solid handling study results for the water pollution control plant. We also have a resolution for the consolidation of the conservation authorities. And the final resolution is urging the province to reinstate the eligibility for curbside blue box collection.
Thank you. Anyone like to pull any individual item up for further discussion or debate? No. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Items under our motions, 9.1, Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McKenna that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls receive the decorative lighting design Confederation Drive pedestrian bridge report dated October 7th, 2025 and prepared by Gabriel McKinnon as information.
Thank you. And further discussion?
Thank you. We were given a report that showed us how the lighting will be on our beautiful new bridge at Confederation Drive. And we look forward to seeing that being built out over the coming months.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor McKenna. The Council Corporation of Town of Smiths Falls receive the decorative lighting design Confederation Drive pedestrian bridge report dated October 7th, 2025 and prepared by Gabriel McKinnon as information. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried. Okay, Councillor McKenna, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls receive and accept the draft 20-year waste management master plan completed by Dillon Consulting Limited, and further that Council directs staff to action all of the 11 recommendations presented in the draft 20-year waste management master plan for investigation by staff for future implementation. And further, that Council directs staff to engage non-eligible source location property owners or commercial properties to propose agreements to ensure cost recovery by the town for the continued curbside collection of non-eligible source materials, such as recycling, as presented in Committee of the Whole Report 2025-129.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Yes, Council was quite intrigued in this long-term plan. The recommendations are pretty straightforward. It's very well written in plain English, and the opportunity to get ready for the implementation. We're looking at 2027 as that coincides with the renewal of our waste collection contract. So the staff are being asked to move forward with implementation details over the next year and a half with a rollout over after 2027 of the majority of the 11.
Any further comments? Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor McGuire. The Council of the Corporation of Town of Smiths Falls receive and accept the draft 20-year waste management master plan completed by Dillon Consulting Limited. And further, the Council directs staff to action all of the 11 recommendations presented in the draft 20-year waste management master plan for investigation by staff for future implementation. And further, the Council directs staff to engage non-eligible source location property owners, commercial properties in brackets, to propose agreements to ensure cost recovery by the town for the continued curbside collection of non-eligible source materials, recycling, as presented in Committee of the Whole Report 2025-129. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls approved the water financial plan in November 2025 for the period 2026 to 2035 is prepared by Hempson Consulting Limited. And that staff be authorized to submit the above noted plan to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, MMAH, and the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, in accordance with the Safe Drinking Act as prescribed by OREG 453/07, and further that the water financial plan be made available upon request to the public and provide notice of availability to those served by the system.
Further discussion?
Yeah, this allows us to get our water license, like renew our water license.
Keep giving people water.
Yeah. I'm having a problem with it.
You drink water. Any further comments? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Brennan. The Council Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls approved the Water Financial Plan, November 2025, for the period 2026 to 2035, as prepared by Hempson Consulting Ltd. And that staff be authorized to submit the above noted plan to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, MMAH, and the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, in accordance with the Safe Drinking Act as prescribed by OREG 453-07/07. And further, the water financial plan be made available upon request to the public and provide notice of availability to those served by the system. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, inquiries or announcements? Councillor Brennan.
I have a trivia question as my inquiry or announcement. So it says Christmas themed. What is the Grinch's real name?
Jay.
Good one. You're correct. His name is Ethan Hu, and he's the adopted child of Sister Clara Nella Hu and Rose Hu. So it's Ethan.
Wow.
Or Jay.
Sounds like Jay.
Jay who?
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I guess, and as is customary, I know people are dreading this.
Jay's ready to lead us.
Yes, Ethan over there.
I'm still laughing.
We in our final meeting before Christmas every year, we do like to wish everyone a happy holidays, Merry Christmas. So the tradition has been we sing, we wish you a Merry Christmas, right? So Councillor McGuire, you are the one who's got the most experience, musical talent. We'll let you lead the way.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
All right. And Councillor Robinson, back to you.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that this council adjourn its proceedings at 9:02 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Brennan. This council adjourns proceedings at 9:02 p.m. and stands so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? Good night, everyone. Have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.